The Jacobson family donated their ancestral farm, Cloverdale, to the Vesterheim Norwegian-American Museum in 1977. The farm had been in the family for 127 years, but had not been operated by an immediate family member since 1954. Beginning as early as the 1850s, when Abraham Jacobson left the farm for college, a trend began of moving away from the family tradition of farming to the city with all its cultural and intellectual life. Movement away from the land and into other professions by successive generations led to the eventual abandonment of the farm. In 1825, the first organized group of Norwegian immigrants left their homes to sail from the port of Stavanger on the sloop Restoration, bound for the New World. Throughout the rest of the century, hundreds of thousands more followed those original emigrants. They landed on both American and Canadian soil, and from there went by foot, train, boat, or wagon into the interior. They came to North America looking for land. Carrying what little they possessed, they began a new life. Among these hundreds of thousands of immigrants were Jacob and Gro Abrahamson, occupants of a husmannsplass, or tenant farm, who left a stony river valley in Telemark with their 3 children in 1848. After crossing the Atlantic, they journeyed over half the continent, settling first in Muskego, Wisconsin. Like most immigrants, they carried few belongings. One object was a tina, or bentwood storage box made of birch, which bore the initials JASS for Jacob, Abraham's son, Steinbole, and the date 1847. Since this was the year before their departure, the box was probably made for the journey. Judging from objects remaining on the farm, they also had a handmade wooden trunk and an iron for making the Norwegian pastry krumkake. In the summer of 1850, the Abrahamsons left Wisconsin and settled in Springfield Township, south of Decorah, Iowa. They made a claim for the land, broke ground, and built a log home. During the first winters, Jacob found work in the logging camps along the Mississippi, where he earned 50 cents a day. The young son, Abraham, was hired out as a plowman. Ultimately, the farm became self-supporting. Besides the house, a stone barn for hay storage and animals was built. A blacksmith shop was another early addition to the farmstead. The furnishings of the home were locally made. Some were of traditional design, like the kubestol, or log chair, carved from a single log. While the way of life on the Jacobson farm remained essentially Norwegian during the early years, the customs and opportunities in the New World soon brought change to the family. The son, Abraham, established Jacobson as the family name, though the members of previous generations had identified themselves by following their first names with the names of their fathers, plus son or dottir. In 1853, only 2 years after the family arrived in Iowa, Abraham Jacobson left home to study at Illinois State University in Springfield, becoming the first in the family to move away from their traditional means of living, farming, toward intellectual pursuits, a trend which would become even more apparent in later generations. At Springfield, Abraham became acquainted with a young man named Robert Lincoln, the son of another famous Abraham, who the immigrant from Iowa heard in political debates. Abraham Jacobson and Robert Lincoln were classmates and were on the same debate team at the university. Years later, Robert Lincoln wrote to Abraham Jacobson in Decorah saying, quote, I recall those days very clearly, and no figure in them more distinctly than yours. Abraham left Springfield in 1860 as an ordained pastor in the Lutheran Church. His first years as a pastor were marked by restless movement, traveling, and ministering to Norwegian communities in the Dakota Territory, Chicago, and Quebec. In 1865, he returned to study, now at Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. His life changed in 1868 when he accepted a call at Perry Parish, southwest of Madison, Wisconsin, where he remained for more than a decade. Sometime earlier, he had married Nicolina Hegg, who lived on a neighboring farm in Decorah. With her and a family of 5 children, he established a happy home in the Perry parsonage. Among the mementos of Nicolina's origins is a chest of drawers which a sister had received as a confirmation present in Norway, in which she persuaded her family to bring to America. It ultimately passed on to Nicolina, and it became a cherished heirloom in the Jacobson family. In their 10 years of residency at Perry, the Jacobsons commissioned a local immigrant carpenter to make walnut furniture in the style of the time, and also acquired fine Victorian pieces from Milwaukee. These were as different from their early furnishings as their new life was from the early days. They had even come to own a sewing machine. But problems with health led Reverend Jacobson to leave Perry in 1878 and return with his family to the old home in Iowa. His presence was also much needed on the family farm, as Jacob, the original settler, died in 1879, and Grow, his wife, died in 1884. Additions were soon made to the original log house. A parlor was built to accommodate the furniture from Wisconsin and also to entertain friends, and a shanty was constructed where cooking could be done in summer. The shanty may well have contained the simple but handsome locally made walnut cupboard, which continued to have a prominent place in the room after it was incorporated into the house as a dining area. Abraham introduced the latest modern farming methods, making the farm more productive and profitable. But Abraham's interests went well beyond the day-to-day operation of the farm. He was active in a local horticultural society, and for 15 years he was the farm and garden editor for the Norwegian language newspaper Decorah-Posten. For a time in the mid-1880s, Abraham was a salesman from Mont Wagons. From 1903 to 1905, he was a member of the 31st General Assembly of the Iowa Legislature, and writing acquired an increasing place in his life as he became older. Abraham made sure his children received an education. Clara became a teacher and wrote much of the history and took many of the pictures which made this presentation possible. Daughter Helga went on to marry President Lars Boe of St. Olaf College. Mary married President I.F. Gross of Concordia College. Their brother Carl took over the farm upon the death of Abraham, but his interests were more intellectual than agrarian. Rather than following new developments in farming, he maintained the practices of his father to the letter, so that history, in a sense, stood still at Cloverdale. This fact, along with remarkable documentation in the form of letters and photographs, gives us an extraordinarily complete record of a Norwegian immigrant farmstead. Incidentally, the name of the farm, Cloverdale, stems from the fact that Abraham made the pioneering introduction of clover as a crop to Winneshiek County. The Jacobson Farmstead had reached the peak of its physical development several years before the death of Abraham in 1910. A striking memento of this last phase of growth is a massive oak dining table presumably obtained by Carl and Minnie in the early years of their marriage to furnish the dining room created from the shanty of 1883. Even the air of modest grandeur given the farmstead in Abraham's time was retained by Carl until his death in 1949 on the eve of the farm's centennial. Carl, who had himself obtained a college education before taking over the farm operation, made an education available to all of his children. All four of those remaining in 1954 were established in academic or scientific positions. The operation of the farm had to fall into the hands of relatives outside the immediate line in which it had been held. The descendants of this original line, however, still made lengthy summer visits to the family farm and had a desire to see it preserved as a living reminder of the importance of agriculture and the relationship to the land in the immigrant experience. The Jacobson Farmstead was given to Vesterheim in 1977 to serve as a record of immigrant farmer life and an educational tool.